Let's call the meeting to order. This is the September 20th, 2018 Town of Sherborn Select Board meeting. I'd ask the town administrator to read the agenda with any proposed changes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, consideration of the consent agenda, the payroll warrant, an appointment to Farm Pond Advisory Committee, request for a one-day liquor license, Robert Schuman of Zaftig's. The minutes have been removed, so you can amend that. Then next meeting dates are listed. Then consideration of financial operational matters, consideration of housing trust final report, and establishing a housing trust with Grace Shepherd. Treasurer's report on town accounts audit results, Heidi Doyle, town treasurer. Financial update, Sharon McPherson, finance director, accountant. Consideration of possible vote for a fall town meeting, special town meeting. That should say special town meeting. Road construction projects was Sean Colleen, CM&D director, facilities manager. Review and vote of road projects for the fall and other items. Then routine business as town administrator report, selectmen reports, and adjourn.
Any amendments from the board on the agenda? Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Terrific. We have one public comment from Miss Nancy Hess.
Well, you who have served on the board for many years can turn off your hearing aids because you've heard this a million times before, but we mailed the tax bills, real estate and personal property today, and in those we have a stuffer, our usual stuffer, and on the back of it, it has a form for making a tax aid donation to help the elderly or disabled. And all the information about the assistance through the assessor's office is on that. We had calls in the past when we have done the front of the flyer like this. We were unsure of when the bills would be mailed, so we were unsure of the due date. The bills were mailed before October 1st, so the due date is November 1st. And we extend our hours on that day until 6 o'clock. But I urge, as in the past, for you not to wait until November 1st. It is crucial to the cash flow of the town to have people step up, and we've always had people step up early. We're not way early this year, but we are a week ahead of the required mailing date. So I would especially ask those who came running in December and were able to pay their taxes 6 months ahead, that maybe you could send them in a month ahead this year so that we can prime the pump. So that's basically it. There's information about paying online, which saves you coming to the tax office, and we do that through the town website.
Perfect. Nancy, in our July meeting, I remember we authorized the inclusion of an additional stuffer, and I can't remember the topic.
And that was the recycling committee, and they withdrew. They're going to go a different route. So.
Perfect. Thanks, Nancy. Yep. Let's move on to the consent agenda. Payroll warrant. There is an opening to replace Sophia Hill on the Farm Pond Advisory Committee, and the FPAC has recommended Karen Kaplan to be appointed for a term to expire on June 15th, 2021. There's a one-day liquor license for the Robert Schuman Zaftig for the Norfolk Hunt Club brunch on September 29th, 2018.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Can I ask the question be divided?
Certainly. Which would you like to split out, Paul?
The request for the one-day liquor license?
Terrific. So accept that as a friendly amendment?
Yeah, I accept it.
Yes.
Perfect. So we're approving the warrant, the FPAC appointment, and that's it. All in favor? Perfect. Paul, the Hunt Club liquor license.
On the issue of the Hunt Club, this is at the Sherborn Community Center for 75 people. As I have discussed numerous times over the last decade. The standard is, for police details, is 100 people, not 75, and there was no justification provided why the Norfolk Country Club should require additional security beyond that, which is standard. If we take action to impose requirements that are not consistent with generally accepted practices, and we have no justification for doing so, we create the potential for liability for this town. So I would I would support approval of a one-day liquor license without the police detail.
Terrific. And is that a motion, I assume?
Yes.
Is there a second for that?
Well, I just wanted to comment, there actually is a reason listed here. It says traffic. It says requirements, one detail, 11:30 to finish, and reason for traffic.
Yeah, that's not sufficient, and this is a luncheon, so it's an event that goes from 12 to 2 on I believe, a weekday. There's no need for a traffic detail.
Is there a second on Paul's motion or discussion?
I think it's a Saturday, by the way.
Is it a Saturday?
I believe so.
Yeah, it is. The 29th is a Saturday.
Saturday, so there's even less traffic.
I would like us to consider having a policy on this, but until we do, my position will be the same as it was on the last one, which is to concur with the recommendation of the police department until we come up with a set policy.
I agree with you, Chuck. I'm on the same wavelength. If the police chief thinks it's necessary, I would go along with that.
Mike, Eric?
I agree.
Without a second, is there a separate motion to approve the request for the one-day liquor license?
I move approval.
I'll second.
All in favor? And Paul, we won't ask you to sign the license. It's how collegial on my part. Terrific. Okay, let's move on to the next agenda item, which is the Housing Trust final report and consideration of establishing a housing trust. I don't see Grace here, but I do see Addie Mae and Frank.
I'm Grace tonight. She moves better than I do, though.
We've never seen Grace look as fine as tonight.
This is a team effort, and the reason I'm here representing Grace is that Grace, John, and Higley and I worked this summer to craft wording in the general plan to support the housing production plan in recommending to the Board of Select Board that a Sherborn Housing Trust be established to assist us in not only meeting but also maintaining our 10% affordable housing. Just by way of background, this was a recommendation about 10 years ago at town meeting. It never passed. Did not get the support of the selectmen, did not get the support of advisory. There was really not much interest in affordable housing 10 years ago as there is today. But the principles are pretty much the same. The Affordable Housing Trust will allow the town to be able to accumulate funds that would be used specifically for affordable housing. And those funds come from various sources. And so we're basically here to support the current housing partnership to move forward with their recommendations to the selectmen to establish a housing trust, affordable housing trust.
Oops, sorry. So Addie Mae Weiss, I'm the chair of the Housing Partnership, and as from the Housing Partnership perspective, we, as Frank noted, it is in the Housing Production Plan that it does suggest that a strategy for helping us achieve our 10% is to create a housing trust, and this would be a separate entity. The housing partnership would continue to serve a role as an advocacy, an educational group that is looking at what types of housing are there in other cities and towns, and how can we produce housing in Sherborn, what would look right, and also continuing to advocate for how affordable housing fits in Sherborn, and encourage maintaining an understanding of where we are, constantly being vigilant on where are we at our current SHI. So there's still a need for the housing partnership, but there's a need for a housing trust that is really the financial entity. And the letter that was sent to the select board from Grace and John Higley and Frank Jenkins was reviewed by the planning board, and we supported this in that a huge section of it does come directly from the housing production plan, and it talks about different ways that the housing trust could be set up. There are municipal housing trusts, which is the most common. There are some concepts out there which would require some more, I guess, town council or another legal review of whether they're still possible. There were some interesting concepts, such as the Concord has a 501(c)(3) charitable type housing trust, which is unique, and it allows some flexibilities that are not available for municipal housing trusts. So we still don't know what the best format a housing trust would take in our town, but the need for a housing trust is clear, that there needs to be some financial arm that is going to be for multiple reasons, whether a developer builds something and the situation doesn't allow for affordable housing to be part of that project, but we need an offset to make sure that we have some funding to continue to add affordable housing. Right now, we don't have any kind of account for that type of money to go into to ensure that we are able to maybe do these small, sustainable, affordable housing projects.
And you said that the Concord Housing Development Corp. is set up as a 501(c)(3)?
It is. Of course, Concord is about 5 times the population of Sherborn, and they do have a 501(c) housing development corporation that was developed by a special statute in 2006. So what I'm not sure on, and I haven't gotten a clear answer, is if that's something that's still possible. It was a special act at the Massachusetts legislature, and whether that still is something that's an option, I don't know. Concord also has a housing trust and a housing foundation and a housing authority, so they have multiple branches, but that is the idea of a charitable trust is a unique idea, and it might be a good fit for Sherborn.
So, just to say a couple of things. One, historically, I was on the board when this issue came up before, and there was 2 issues that were causing concern. The first was a lack of champions to serve. It's nice to have an organization, but if you don't have people who are gung-ho and willing to work on it, they're just, at that time, not much interest in people who are coming forward. And the other thing was a concern about having an independent organization that's so independent that it could undertake projects that were considered counter to the wishes of the elected representatives of the town, because the Affordable Housing Trust are not elected officials. So if they came up with a project and they were gung-ho in the project and pursuing it, and yet we had, 1,000 citizens at a town meeting with near riot conditions, that doesn't slow down the housing trust at all. So there was a concern about having an organization that was a little too independent. And but there's a couple of other points. One was that, as I'm sure everybody knows, for years I've been advocating that instead of creating a affordable housing trust, we actually make use of the Sherborn Community Housing Corporation. We have a special act, we created a corporation, we use it to build Leland Farms and Woodhaven. It had an exemption from the legislature on prevailing wages and on competitive bidding and all kinds of advantages. It needs to be updated, it would need to be tweaked, but it could easily become a 501c3 corporation, whereas the Affordable Housing Trust is going to be problematic for a variety of legal reasons to become a 501c3. So, having said all that, I'm in favor of getting affordable housing built, and I'm in favor of following your recommendation. I'm just very hesitant about those concerns that came up before. Having been through this before, I'm
Right.
concerned about it, but if the planning board's, that's what the planning board wants to do, and if the housing partnership, that's what you want to do, and you have people who are willing to do it, I don't think it's the best way to go. I think reviving our own corporation, we can go back to the legislature, tweak that with a home rule petition.
That's an excellent point. I did not realize that Sherborn Community Housing, Inc. was still in existence. I thought that had expired, but has that been maintained?
It has not been maintained, but it can be revived.
It can be revived as it was?
Yeah, it just have to pay the back fees.
And you could recover the attractive features of it?
Yes. This special legislation
Of course, that would have
authorizes
to be looked at. I
the
think
town
that
to organize a special corporation.
I think that's an excellent idea to see if we can reach back and use that as a basis for moving forward.
What was nice about that was it provided insulation and
Yep.
limitation of liability for
I
the
realize
town.
that, yep.
For us to be directly involved with things, then we become liable for quality of construction and contract disputes, and when you're building projects, you have contractors and claims and delays and all that kind of stuff, and it's best to keep the town, we learned it was best to keep the town insulated from projects like that and have an instrumentality to do it, not try and do it ourselves. So,
I think we're in agreement that if that can be revived and we can reclaim the advantages we had with that, we should certainly look at that as a possibility.
So I know that was something that we did look at when we
Yeah.
were writing the housing production plan, and it was our understanding that it had been
Right.
basically sunset expired. And so if it could be revived, then it does fit closer in alignment with the suggestion for a nonprofit, affordable 501(c)(3) type trust. As far as it's definitely something in this town where people frequently say we have too many committees and we have a shortage of people willing to step forward to be volunteers. And that is one reason why I do think it's important that the structure and the role of what the Housing Trust's purpose is limited to really having something that's, the people that would serve on it, their wheelhouse would be financial investment, development type skill set, with the idea that there would be maybe someone from the housing partnership, we would be working together, and obviously a select board member would be involved as needed, but to keep it focused and not put too much, not make it in charge of, affordable housing monitoring, and there's a number of other tasks that other housing trusts do deal with that I think in our town would make it would be a lot more practical to make it a very focused trust with what the responsibilities are, and maybe someone would be willing to step forward and participate because the guides of what their responsibilities are very clear.
Sure, can I say something? I just think, just to address Paul's point about, I think affordable housing is in a much different place than it was probably the last time you considered this, and I
Yes,
think
it was.
it's a very hot topic in town that a lot of people are interested in, and I think you would have a lot of volunteers that want to have some control over it at this point, just because the town is trying to get control over it based on our fall town meeting last year and a lot of the discussions in the housing partnership and our development of our housing plan. And to another point, I think it's important to establish whether it's the corporation or the trust. I think I'll leave that up to lawyers or whoever thinks, whatever works the best, but at the same time, we need something that, I mean, just talking to the developer for 41 North Main, we talked about, you know, if they didn't have an affordable component, we need some sort of way for them to contribute to the town. If they're not going to contribute affordable units, a monetary amount, and a housing trust is a perfect way for them to get money to the town so we can develop affordable housing in another spot if they can't develop it in their project. So I think I'm very much in support of however the structure is, establishing something as soon as we can.
Let me just piggyback on something he said, if I could. That is money. Most towns where I've set up these affordable housing trusts have adopted the Community Preservation Act, which provides state subsidies and a requirement that you spend a certain amount of money on affordable housing. And they have used those funding sources to put the money into affordable housing trust. And the other way to do it is what's called inclusionary housing, which is you have a bylaw that says if you're doing a subdivision and you're going to build more than, let's say, 5 units, then one of those units has got to be affordable, and they have the option to buy out of that by saying, we can't build the affordable unit here, but we'll put in X dollars so that you can build it somewhere else, and you put that money in. So I don't think we have an inclusionary zoning bylaw in the town to provide that second funding source, and I know that the Community Preservation Act lost at the ballot box here in Sherborn twice, so we don't have that funding source. So we're left with dribs and drabs and whatever little extractions the planning board can get from projects that are going on in town, but there isn't going to be that stream of revenue that an affordable housing trust needs to actually do the job.
Oh, you're right. Most towns that do have a trust do have the CPA, and that was a major source of funding. 10 years ago, the proposal was at a time when Sherborn had very few affordable units, and there was not much discussion about adding to that. Things have changed considerably, as you know. Today, if our projects that we have voted and supported and so forth are built, who do materialize, we will be very close to our 10%. So that the Affordable Housing Trust today will be sort of a fine-tuning, you know, maybe 6 units or 8 units instead of a major project or development with a developer and so forth, which would have been the case 10 years ago. So I think the role of the Affordable Housing Trust doesn't need a massive source of funds at this point, but the dribs and drabs will add up to opportunities for us to maybe add 2 or 3 units or buy a house that may be needing considerable fix-up, and they could buy it, fix it up, and have maybe 1 or 2 affordable units in that house. So it's a fine-tuning of our overall housing production plan to maintain a 10% affordable units in town. So we don't have to worry about non-controlled developers coming in and putting in their own 40Bs.
And Annie Mae and Frank, you're looking for the board to authorize the initiation of a process to
Yes.
create it, not a specific, so whether it be creating a new affordable housing trust or reviving the prior one, you're just looking for a general authorization to initiate the process.
Yes.
As I understand it. Is that?
That's right.
Is that correct, David?
Yes.
Okay.
As the housing partnership has been looking at other, just kind of, we've been using this time to kind of continue to research what other housing trusts are out there, and are going to be, a number of us are attending the conference on housing trust on the 13th of October. But yeah, this is the start of a process to authorize moving forward, and what that looks like, what type of housing trust still would need to be, those details are in the days ahead.
I think there's no downside to setting went up with the limitations that you've talked about, or at least initiating it to go forward. Because we always had one until we dissolved the community preservation, the Sherborn Community Housing Corporation. And we had active projects that were ongoing. So we built a lot that way.
That was revived in 2015 and then redissolved.
Yes, they can be revived again.
Right.
Can I make a motion to initiate the process to
Please.
create an affordable housing trust?
I have one point before you do, George.
Yep.
In the discussion before you vote.
Chuck, if
Sure.
you...
I just want to mention that I've been, as you know, Chuck, head of the nonprofit precision medicine nonprofit. And it was set up as a 501c6 rather than a C3, because it gave us more, I don't have the details on why, but the attorneys felt it gave us more flexibility with the funds. So there may be other structure, maybe some people on board.
Well, the nice thing about a 501c3 is that it's tax exempt in two ways. First, the organization is tax exempt, but secondly, those who write checks to the organization also conduct the donation to that organization, so it's a double tax exemption.
I believe the C6 works the same way also. It's a 501c6. It gives you a little bit more flexibility. I can't tell you what the difference is.
I think as Abby said, there's many options there, and all we need is encouragement from the Board of Selectmen to start pursuing.
Well, I think that's the motion to encourage, yeah. So-
I mean, the one comment I'd like to make is, as you look at options, I encourage you, look at any option, be it the C3, C6, or revising the special legislation, that would, if it actually involves construction, mechanisms that allow you to not fall under prevailing wages, other procurement laws, because just no matter what, it gets cumbersome, and is ultimately going to be more costly to construct anything with those handcuffs.
Well, that was the beauty of the Sherborn Community Housing Corporation. We get those exemptions. They're very hard to get now. I haven't been able to get them again for other organizations. Their
I thought if you could revive it, getting it again, I bet would be hard.
That'd be a good argument for reviving it, yeah. Mike, do you have anything? Terrific. Any further discussion, comment? All in favor of the motion? Passes unanimously, 5-0.
Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you, Annie Mae. Thanks, Frank.
Thanks.
So our next of the four financial operational matters is the treasurer's report on town accounts, audit results. Heidi. And Sharon.
Good evening. So Heidi Doyle, Child Treasurer, and this is Sharon Everett, who is from Legal Counsel. So I'm here tonight to report back on the audits I was doing in financial institutions on where our town tax IDs money is and who has access to the accounts. Been here almost a year now, and part of it as I was trying to do my due diligence is looking into what obligations I have. I have to go through a bonding process, which means I am actually personally held responsible for anything. After the insurance would cover the town, the insurance would come after me, and I have personal obligations to the town, as well as the assistant treasurer. So I do take these things very seriously on what my duties are. And going through, it came to light that there were some accounts that neither the assistant treasurer nor the treasurer had access to. And you have some individuals that are on these accounts that are not bonded, and working with legal counsel, town council, we found out that it does not appear that they have the authority on these accounts. So in your packets, I have a listing of the financial institutions I contacted, what came back. The accounts I had some concerns over, I feel they're actually potential security issues for the town. I found out that one of the accounts has someone who left town over almost a year ago, a little over a year ago, and they're still a signer on the account. I think that's a liability for the town and a potential liability to have that out there, and especially in what you see in the news today, so that was a concern. That happens to be also on some of the major trust accounts that the signers that are on there, and actually even up until recently, they were going to add some new signers, again, not bonded, but adding potentially to me, not quite what I'd like to see as far as fiduciary obligations in a town, and I'm concerned that the treasurer is not on it, or the assistant treasurer. Also, a concern I've had is I'm finding out that some of the checks being written do not go through the warrant process. So I would like to come here to try and get these matters resolved. I would like to make the town in compliance with what I feel are not only IRS, but other legal requirements. And I'm asking the board for support to have me pursue custody of any town tax ID funds. I guess a question or a scenario I came up with is, if you found out the car your neighbor's been driving for the last 5 years, in and out of Boston, has some new drivers on it, somehow has been registered in your name, would you not go over and ask the neighbor to change the registration and put things into their own name? I mean, it's kind of a little, it's risky, and I would like to limit that risk.
Terrific. As a preliminary matter, this is really a question for the board. We have opinion of town council, Barbara San Andre, one dated December 15th, 2017. Sharon Everett's opinion dated June 12th, 2018. I guess this is a question for Paul, Mike, and Dave. I just don't know the answer. What do we need to do to waive the privilege in order to make it a public documents?
You have to have a majority
I've
vote.
shared it with those that it's relevant to, but to make it a public document, they can just vote to release it as a public document.
Yeah,
We're
we just
discussing
vote.
it right now.
Yes. That's still an opinion. So, yeah, you should, I think you should vote to,
That's my feeling, is if we're going to.
yeah.
So I would move to waive the attorney-client privilege for Barbara San Andre's December 15th, 2017 opinion memo and the opinion letter from Sharon Everett at KP Law dated June 12th, 2018. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Wasn't there three?
Discuss?
No.
We also have an opinion in the form of an email dated August 9th, 2018, which bears on both of those other opinions, and I don't see any reason not to release that email,
Terrific, so that's good. Thanks, Mike.
unless David's got an objection.
Which document?
The email from.
Page 13 in the packet, it's the August 9th email from Sharon to you.
Okay.
It's about the historical, it just goes of the history of the statute and how those have changed over the years.
Yes. Is that all right?
Okay, so that would be added to that
Yep.
motion?
I would include that in my motion. Is there a second?
And that would include, that would go through to the, all the way back through the chain, so it includes Elizabeth's historical information and all the additional information in that chain?
Right.
Okay, good.
Yeah, no, I think,
Can I ask a question before? You know, I always ask questions of council. Is there anything in there that you feel needs to be redacted, or are you comfortable with releasing everything?
I don't recall anything that needs to be redacted. I'm happy to take another look, but from my recollection, I don't see anything that needs to be done. That
We
needs to
can-
be withheld from public disclosure.
Okay, thank you.
Just, you could vote it pending her final check on that, if you wanted to.
I think we've probably beaten this to death. I don't know that we need a further
yeah,
check on this.
I've read all these documents this afternoon. I'm not going to substitute my opinion for yours, but I didn't see anything. Your memory is accurate, in my opinion.
Can we redact cell phone numbers?
Sure.
Whose cell phone number?
Council.
Mary Moore.
Good catch, David. Mary, would you like your cell phone number redacted?
Everybody has it anyway.
Seems like everyone on the library building committee and the trustees.
Okay.
I would include the redaction of the cell phone number, even if you don't care. Do I have a second to my motion?
Second.
All in favor? Perfect. Sorry, I just think that's a preliminary matter. Okay.
So my recommendation on the towns with the custody of any accounts is that the treasurer and town treasurer, assistant treasurer are have custody. And custody means we just take care of it. We take care of the administrative details. Who's on the account, who's not on the accounts. In the case of some of the trusts, they would still have full access, and especially in the case of the library trust, they manage and direct everything. Nothing would change onto how they handle their money right now. They call the bank to make a change, they would just call the treasurer's office to make the change. But the treasurer cannot move their money or has any access to changing anything, including where it's held or what to do, unless directed by a library trust. There's very specific laws under the state that protect them on that aspect. So treasurer's office would not have any involvement on moving the money, saying where it goes. They would handle who has access to the money. And that's where I feel it would be in the town's interest and more safe.
What are the other town boards, specifically elected boards, where we have this set up? I remember, was it a couple of years ago, we did this with the Rec Commission revolving fund?
Yeah, I mean, it was a fund, it wasn't the same setup as a trust fund, but it was in the...
What are the other funds where you're the custodian as the town treasurer?
Cemetery.
Cemetery, you have conservation, which is land acquisition as well.
OPEB, trust fund.
You have the general stabilization, the OPEB, and the trust funds, and those are the general ones.
What about some of the COA funds? Are those in the same?
No, COA, and a lot of groups have friends of, which they'll do their own fundraising, and they're actually 501c3s. Little difference is student activities accounts, where they do maintain their own checkbook. We do still put things through a warrant from them, but they show up on a field trip where they have to pay that day with the number of kids that show up. So they have a need where they need to write a check on that day. I don't really see anyone else needing to have a checkbook to write something on that day to people. Everyone else has been able to go through the warrant if you're paying a vendor. And we do checks in advance of a warrant if need be. There's a vehicle to get something if you need it. Sawin Academy has its own trust, and that is a separate tax ID. So years ago, that might have had some involvement and been under the town treasurer, but it has not been since I've seen it. They make their own decision. They handle lower money. They do their own filing.
So I just got handed a sheet of paper that says trust funds, and are these the trust funds we're talking about, these?
Well, these are the ones that I have custody of.
The library ones are not on there.
No, the library's not on here. So I'm asking, you want us to approve this list, or is there another list?
No.
This was a list provided by Sharon of the trust funds that currently she accounts
That she
for.
currently has accounts.
That are currently within town treasurer's custody,
Okay.
and they total $2.4 million.
And I'm still going to be contacting other financial institutions just to make sure there aren't any other parent groups that have opened anything else in a town tax ID. I've surveyed already about 10 to 11 banks in the area and others, so I'm still going to continue with that. And if I find anything, I'm hoping that a general statement that anyone using a town's tax ID has to have, the treasurer and assistant treasurer would have custody of, which is per the Mass General laws. So I'm not looking to target any specific group. I'm trying to make it as a blanket statement of following the law.
We did a similar audit about 4 years ago of credit cards and pulled town credit cards back.
What's the pleasure of the board? How would you like to proceed? Would you like a summary of Sharon's and Barbara's opinion, or?
Yes, so my suggestion would be, we kind of did that, Chuck, the last time we were together.
We did without having
Yeah,
the specific
and
opinions.
we know there's some information the library has where they think there's a different perspective on things, and rather than hash that out in public, which is not going to be all that interesting to the people watching at home, I wonder if it might make sense to authorize town council to speak directly with Jim Murphy first, and make sure there's a clear understanding of what Jim's information and interpretation and understanding is. Make sure that the town council is speaking from a informed position in terms of what the library thinks is going on, and then encourage some type of a, some type of a discussion that would hopefully get to a point where Heidi feels like she is protected, which I think is exactly what you're looking to do. If possible, the library's comfortable with the outcome or understands the reason for the outcome. That would be a win-win in a sense, that everybody would hopefully go away happy, and we wouldn't have a dispute over, if we talk about this today, it's just, we're not going to resolve anything, and it's just going to be, we're going to be tossing words back and forth. I think having town council, a trustee, and Heidi, in a discussion towards resolving it, we could indicate tonight that we support the treasurer's efforts. We want to make sure she's protected. If there's an interim measure that is easy enough, and, we can ask the trustees, the library trustees later in this meeting, maybe if there's anything that they're able to do immediately that might give Heidi some comfort, and if Heidi's comfortable with that, that ought to be done anyway, including things like taking people off of signature cards who aren't authorized to be there because they're not even town residents, things like that.
And maybe setting a bond.
Setting a bond,
But I want to second your motion, your 12-page motion.
Thank you.
My concern with this is, this has been going on since I brought up in December, and we've already met with town council and the library, and they decided library trust, and they were going to have a subcommittee they formed to look into it. And it's getting buried here, and I've kind of hit the
Well, I think
point.
the most important thing is for you to be protected. I mean, I think for our mission is to make sure that you feel and are doing what you need to do to protect yourself.
Right.
But I also think that library trustees have some good faith arguments and information, and in reading these opinions, I do see that they were addressed, but I don't know if they were completely addressed, not through any fault of your opinion, but just because I think there's been a little bit of talking past each other, not intentionally, it's just the way the communications have gone. I would suggest maybe one more try of the library trustees and town council talking directly each other, and maybe then we get another, a final opinion or something, and you guys have one final shot at convincing town council, and maybe that'll satisfy you, but it's got to be done quickly. It's got to be done like within the week or something.
Yes, I was going to say, I'd like to cap it at.
I was going to say, I support that motion, but I would like to make that resolved, or have a deadline for the next meeting on October the 4th.
Well, just to explain a point, I think, for our listeners, that if a donor donates a gift to the library and specifies in the gift that the library is to have custody of it, we can't change that without going to court and getting a cypre order and all that kind of stuff. And we don't know, I don't know from sitting here and reading your opinions, reading the legal opinions, what dollar amount is in gifts that are restricted to the library only, and which gifts are really intended for the town. So I understand the legal argument, but you also, I think, are agreeing and has said in your opinions, this is to town council, that that it's the intent of the donor that really counts. And if the donor is specified the library, then it's the library. And apparently there are a lot of gifts out there. And I haven't gone through all those gifts, and I don't think anybody on the board has gone through all those gifts, and I'm not sure anybody has gone through all those gifts to determine, are we talking about, 1% that stays with the library and 99% goes to the town? Or are we talking about 99% is where it's supposed to be, and 1% is supposed to go to the treasurer? So not having a sense of that at all, I'm trying to second what Mike has said, that I think the work isn't just about arguing over what happened historically, but actually what money are we talking about? And we want people to continue to make donations, and we don't want someone out there saying, oh my God, I intended this, and I feel betrayed, and I'm never going to give any more money.
And transparency is important too, so that's going to get at that point also.
No, if there is enough evidence to show that that's the intent, as long as town council can say the treasurer's office is not liable, and that's been my goal, as Mike was saying.
That's what we're looking to get
Right,
for you, if that's,
right,
and not to twist town council's arm, because she may not feel that way, and we
Right.
need to know that too.
Right.
But I would rather know that, knowing that all of the library trustees' information and arguments have been well heard and kind of exhausted. And I think this is an excellent opinion, it's a very, very thorough opinion. And as far as it goes, we credit it and support Heidi in her efforts, but I just want to make sure we've got 100% of what we need.
Perfect. Any other discussion up here?
Maybe just a clarification. I know you said they should kind of give them a shot to figure it out amongst themselves, but you coming before here, what was your goal? Is it to have us vote to support this MOU we're seeing before us?
No, what I was looking for is, after the 3 legal opinions have been done, I would like to move forward and actually have all town custodies, including the library, just be under the treasurer's custody. If the library wants to move it different, what it seems Sharon was saying is there needed to be a town meeting vote that would have been done so that the town would have voted to give the library trust their own treasurer and who could handle that, and that would have relieved me of duty. So I was looking to say, in that interim period, before they go to a town meeting vote for that, if that's how they choose to go, I would like to ensure that the funds were, what I felt at this point was legally compliant, which was with the town treasurer, since I'm personally responsible.
And so you're requesting us to make a vote in that order, like, you know what I mean? Or
Right.
basically vote to support this MOU or authorize David to sign the MOU. I see that he's the signatory on this. I'm trying to get to, like, if we ask him to go back, what are we deferring?
I guess
You
the
know what I'm
MOU
saying?
would have to be signed by both sides,
It was-
and
the
my
MOU yeah,
impression
so-
is the library trustees aren't about to sign the MOU, so
No.
it's a little bit of a moot point.
Right, so I was just looking for support to proceed with custody of all town funds.
Yeah, I'm just picking up on Eric's point and Mike's point. I'm not sure this board has authority to order the library trustees, or even to sign a contract committing the library trustees to something. Whether or not they're acting lawfully or not lawfully, given the uncertainty about where the funds came from and who the donors were and what the intent was, I'm not comfortable with, they're separately elected, they're citizens, they're neighbors. I'm not comfortable with the notion that being asked to order another respected board in town to do something. I'd rather everybody, there's good people on all sides of this issue. Let's all work together, come up with.
Somebody else said that once.
I guess
Different context.
I think in Los Angeles.
I just have a practical question here. What is, to the library trustees, why don't you want the trust funds under the custody of the town treasurer? What's the reason? Is there a certain reason why not?
First and foremost, the donors have asked us to have custody and control of those funds, and we're obligated to respect their wishes, and we will do what we need to do. Secondly, I think as Paul or somebody else mentioned, many of the donations that we raise are implicitly because we, independently of the town, are going to administer them and have custody, and that it's going to harm us in what we've done in the past and what we hope to do in the future with endowments by having it have to go to the town. And third, believe it or not, the views of town treasurers change over time. Already, the town treasurer has asked town council whether it can use our funds in a way that was not brought before the library trustees. So to have the town treasurer have some specter of having control in those funds beyond mere custody is just not consistent with what we have. Fourth, what I would say is that we believe that the town vote was already taken believe it or not, April 2nd, 1860. And we also believe that under the case law, that it's quite clear that even if a vote hadn't been taken, that those donated funds have to stay in our custody and control. It was in fact a fight. It was in fact a legal case between the town of Melrose and its library trustees, in which the same position that the treasurer said
Now we're doing exactly
was
what
made.
Yeah.
And in that situation, the
the
court
whole
said
point was to
Right.
that.
not have this, because now I think we have to read town
Sorry,
council's
I-
opinion.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right, this is, I thought the whole point was to have
Yeah, I mean,
a discussion about whether or not we can resolve this. The Melrose case that you cite is cited in all three opinions, is discussed. I have a question for Mary and you, Jim. Is this approach of trying to resolve this before the next meeting, are you all, does that make sense to you all?
Absolutely. We'd invite one of the members of the selectmen to be on that working group. We also really would hope that one of the things that would be helpful to us is that ultimately the library treasurer also be there. So we are all for a working group, and if it includes a member of the selectmen, great. If you don't want to participate, fine. We would work very hard to have a constructive meeting before, if your next meeting is October 4th, given the time to do it.
Can the library trustees, would it be, so, I mean, maybe this is just too simple, get their, I mean, are you working on getting your own tax ID? Or can you have your town tax ID?
No, we really don't have a good path to getting a tax ID. What we've done is we've contacted other towns, and other towns have told us, for example, town of Brookline, we just checked it today, their library trustees have the same tax ID as the town, same as what we've always had done here. And in fact, when I became on the library trustees, we confirmed that was the people who confirmed that was the tax ID we should use. But again, we're all for Mike's suggestion, working group, work hard at it, see what we can come up with.
Jim-
Go over all the details.
Jim, the bonding question really, I think you can separate that from the others. I mean, if you're committing to get bonded, maybe we can also authorize David to work with you to make sure that that gets done expeditiously. And that, I don't personally think there's a real issue with bonding, but it's something that the town is prudent to have all its money bonded, or anybody who has the money in custody bonded, so. Yeah, so, right, so that's an easy fix, right?
Right, it's
No,
not.
it's not.
Why not?
We've already looked into that. Do you want to say what the,
Well, I
She
think
was with
that as a
that.
practical matter, you might find that it's going to be very difficult to get bonding for somebody who doesn't have the statutory authority to have control of the funds. Until town meeting votes to authorize the treasurer, that's when the bonding requirement comes in. And that's the statutory authority that a company would have to say, yes, you have this financial obligation, and you have the authority to have a bond, and that's why we'll bond you. I can't say I've spoken to surety companies to see exactly what their position is, but I would suspect that that's what you might find.
If I could add, I think, we've tried to really move forward with good faith and goodwill, and I like the suggestion of going back to the table because the phone and the email has not worked. But I think that, we do have a difference of opinion. We look at the historic documents, we believe the vote has been taken, and I think we'd like to, as Jim suggested, and we suggested via email last month, come together and really hash this out and get to some sort of an understanding so that we can move forward together as a team.
But last month, Mary, Jim did talk about it, maybe it was 2 months ago, I can't remember, I think it was August, or maybe early August, but there were a lot of documents referenced, and you just referenced the vote. We at least haven't seen those documents. I don't know if town council has seen those documents. We've seen Elizabeth's recitation of things she's found in archives, which was very, interesting and helpful, but you really have to go by documents and original sources. We can't ask town council to use hearsay as a source, basis for her opinion, so.
I agree. I think there's a difference of opinion. I think we need to have a discussion about it. So
But you'll have these documents available that,
No, absolutely.
Okay.
I think that the key is, as you're suggesting, that each of us has the same set of documents.
Okay.
And go through them from 1851 forward. And just figure out where we could have a displacement and whether or not we have solutions.
Like you, I thought we were heading down that path in August, but I support your recommendation.
I mean, we're a small town, our legal budget's big enough anyway. We don't want to get this to the point where we've got a dispute between the treasurer and the library trustees. We also don't want our treasurer to resign. We've had enough of that going around. We've got a great treasurer. We want to keep her going. And we also don't want you guys to be out of sorts, and we don't want you donors to stop giving money. We've had, people who don't trust the town. It's not a good thing. So we've all got an interest in making this work.
So does the treasurer want the library treasurer to be bonded for the short term? I understand the statement that maybe it can't happen, but knowing insurance companies and dealing with them often and representing some of them, sometimes they take anything that pays them a premium.
It's certainly worth exploring.
My big concern is, does that, even bonding him, does that relieve me of liability? Right now, I am not on these accounts. I don't know what these accounts are doing. I know checks aren't coming through warrant process. I don't have any control yet. Under a town's tax ID and what I've read from the opinions, I'm personally responsible. And that's where I've kind of been drawing the line saying this has gone on long enough. So I don't mind another week or two to try and work it out, but I would like from town council to relieve me of the responsibility or have the funds moved over. I'm just looking for some way that Lisa Lynch, the assistant treasurer, and myself are not personally responsible for funds that we have no access and no control over, when it looks like we should.
I just want to correct something. You mentioned about funds moving over. The funds don't change.
No.
Yeah, unless the
Right.
trustees.
No, and what Jim mentioned about the treasurer going to move funds, that was an idea. I was looking into what debt service was, and the library trust has taken that as I was looking to spend their money, and that was not the case. It was looking at, was there creative ways, if there were extra expenses on the library, of how to finance it in a short-term debt.
And you were asked to look into that.
I was asked to look into it. It came through my letter, and he's come across as saying that I asked to move the funds, and that's not, I'd like that corrected. That was not the case.
I'd say so. My original question is, what action are you looking for us? I was happy you said you're willing to defer it maybe a week or two. That's kind of the answer I was looking for. I would encourage it to go on the next agenda, and I'll encourage the selectmen to take action on that. If that means, if you guys need to negotiate language as MOU, they'll have you sign it. I think that's the critical part to this whole thing. I think you may have to have some compromise. It's going to be a tough lift with two legal opinions from an independent counsel who has no real vested interest with really the treasurer or you, has kind of both said in a certain direction there. So I would encourage both parties to, come to a compromise that you can actually, you can both live with.
And we can review and approve 2 weeks from now, on October the 4th.
Yes.
I mean, that's
There's actually more than two lawyers in this room, so there's more than two opinions there.
I was once told you get 4 lawyers, you get 7 opinions.
And I bill by the hour, so my opinion's very long. Jeffrey?
I just want to point out that with the fall town meeting, it's possible that we have to have some input from the town on how the structure is set up. We're fortunate to have a fall town meeting currently, so that can happen reasonably quickly also.
And I want to point out that we all know where we want to end up. We want to basically end up in doing the same thing, but it's how to get there.
I think the ultimate goal would be a language and an MOU that people could live with, that everyone would be willing to sign. That'd be probably the ultimate goal. Or if you make it some agreement that the status quo, but it doesn't sound like the status quo is going to be livable up until whenever that's resolved. I hate to ask this, because it's not going to be me, but is there any volunteers from the board to help to join in on these conversations?
I'd suggest one of the
If I can,
lawyers.
That's what I was thinking.
I'm happy to as well.
Yeah.
I'll facilitate.
Thank you.
One of us
That
will
would
do.
be good.
Either Mike or I will be involved.
Yeah.
So. Terrific. Does this require a formal vote? I don't think it does.
No, I don't think it does.
So,
We're
but
just- we're
I
just
do want it on
putting it
the
out.
October 4th agenda.
Yeah.
I'd like to see it resolved by October the 4th. I think there are other issues that are more pressing.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, this is throwing money down a hole.
Okay, the next financial update is from Sharon.
I've been sending things out to you guys. If there's anything you want me to do.
Did you send out the report, the update on the library project spend?
That came out earlier today, I
Yeah,
think.
I did.
Was that in that email earlier?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Well, if I could, I'd just maybe have her say out loud what she said to me, which is, do we have enough funding in place in order to schedule a town meeting in December
This is great.
11th? I believe you said yes.
Yeah, we should.
We want to point out that if there is an issue with cash flow, it takes about 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks to put the borrowing in to pull the money in on a temporary basis for cash flow. And I think I met with Mary Wolf today, and she showed me an email from Jim that was really, explained well what the point of the cash flow with the last 20% that would come in. So, in my view, she could borrow probably up to 1.4 million if she needed to.
But you feel we don't
Temporary
need
for
to.
cash flow.
You feel we're all right?
Yeah, I mean, because the tax dollars are going to start flowing in.
So you and I had this discussion, I just wanted to get it sort of on the record that later on, we're going to be talking about a date for a town meeting, and so I was concerned, given that really the only date that's available for a town meeting is December 11th, that we have in place sufficient resources to cover the town through December 11th, and your answer to that was yes.
Today, that's yes.
Yeah.
I'm not implying that it's going to change tomorrow, I'm just saying
Yeah.
things do change in the matter of a week or
I've been
two.
working on cash flow, and I know how much you love numbers.
And luckily, the bills went out early. That was a
But
big
I and I get together and do cash flow every week.
Okay. Thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but
Well, thank you, Paul, for that segue, because the next item is the consideration of and a possible vote for a fall town meeting. Dave, you want to update us on, my understanding is, thanks to your work and to Carol Marple's work, that we now have a possible date at Lindquist.
Yes. Diane worked on it as well, so.
Great, Diane, do you want to fill us in on the?
She had the first initial contact with the school after the selectmen asked her to find out a date. So she contacted the school and went up through December 6th. And they said they don't have anything until December, and we were trying to find something earlier. And then we were also asked to look at Pine Hill, and we had 2 dates come back from Pine Hill that worked. But there is a memo that was handed out from the town clerk, I believe, opposing any special town meeting going to Pine Hill. So Lindquist would be the ideal place. And that's the ideal time. And you also have a timeline in your packet for December 11th.
I gave it to him, I handed it to him.
So December 11th is the date that we're considering.
We have this.
Correct.
It was a
That's it.
handout.
Just
It was
handout.
a later handout.
Carol had emailed it, but I made copies for everybody.
Great.
One conflict for December 11th is that there is the winter concert at Pine Hill, so a lot of the elementary school parents, including myself, would have a conflict that night. So, I mean, if talking about getting a lot of this, not just myself having a conflict, I can miss a kid's concert.
So we
but-
expect you to be at our meeting.
But I'm saying, like, if we're expecting, if the library wants support of a lot of parents, and there's 80 to 100 families that are going to be at Pine Hill instead of at the town meeting, I think that's something to consider.
Well, I would say that before the meeting started, I did have discussion with Diane, others, about trying to accommodate the fact that there's this concert, and the answer was pretty clear that that's the only date that we can get this facility. if there was a way to do it and not have a conflict, I'm 100% with George on that. You make good points.
And I think there's probably a conflict almost any night, so it probably has to be that night. I just wanted to point out the fact that there is a conflict that night.
And what's the feelings about the date? I mean, we thought later was better. Is this too late? This is getting close to Christmas.
Does December 11th, I'd like to ask the library trustees if that sounds like a date that, I mean, getting a number that we would want to be in discussion of by that point.
There were two issues. One is getting a mail order on the final dollar.
Could we do a January one?
And then the second issue was having some more progress based on some recent changes in the project. Getting more progress, so the further out the better.
Can we go out to January?
And based on what we heard, I guess, a week ago, I'm not sure even December 11th is going to be late enough, is it?
There was a revised schedule that was delivered as promised.
Yeah.
And the schedule completion date is January 19th. No, January.
Of 2020?
You could go to 8:30.
Didn't say what you...
Yeah, I mean, it could be, I mean, it's fine. It's.
You could go 8:30 the same night.
Do what?
What time is it?
Are there any other issues other than, another question I had, if we're setting a fall town meeting, are there other warrant articles other than the library that we're talking about at this point?
Trees, yeah.
Then don't do 8:30, we'll be there all night.
That's true.
David, recreation?
Yeah, Eric and Mike, I'm not sure if you heard George's suggestions.
Recreation, we want to amend the hunting bylaw.
Starting the meeting later, starting at 8:30.
No, I didn't suggest that, David. I think we can start, at the time it starts, I think, it's just, I wanted to point out a conflict, but I mean, it is what it is, so. That's the only night that works at Linguist Commons, that's the only night. 7, I think, 6:30 or 7, so.
George, what grade is it?
5th, I think it's 4th and 5th, or just 5th, it's not the whole elementary school, so.
It's only 5th grade.
So it's your kid, okay.
Yeah, I told you, it was a conflict of mine, it's also, there's almost 90 kids in the 5th grade, so.
Well, some parents
It's
may be
it's a
happy to
large
have
class.
recess.
Yeah, exactly, there's a reason to get out of it, exactly. So,
Remembering my children's conflicts.
90 kids, 180 parents.
So to the extent that there are people who wonder why would the town of Sherborn want to have a town meeting, it's to address what? Why are we having a town meeting?
Why are we having a town meeting?
I think we should tell the voters why we're having a town meeting.
The trustees will, at some point, will have a number that the project might be short.
For the library construction project.
Right.
Right, to discuss funding for the library construction project.
I just think, just talking about the mechanics is fine, but voters out there are going to ask to attend, and they're going to want to know, why is the town calling?
Well, I think right now, all we have is the list from the contractor of the number of delays that they've encountered. I don't think we have a breakdown of the cost associated with each of those delays and who's responsible for those costs.
You're not going to know who's responsible for them for a long time.
But we need to keep the project moving.
If you make the town meeting too late, you'll actually have to put the project on hold because you'll run out of money.
run out of funds.
Well, given their theoretical.
It's better to come up with a theoretical high number to plan on the town meeting and come back down on the day of town meeting with an actual number than to run out of funds and not be able to continue.
Sean?
Winter solstice is December 21st. You should refer to that as winter town meeting, and there's a reason New England towns don't do winter town meetings in January. Pretty high likelihood we'll all have conflict.
Especially Sean.
And at that town meeting, we're asking the voters to raise money to complete the project, additional money beyond what was already authorized. That required a 2/3 vote?
Yes.
If we're going to borrow money, if that's the solution that we're going to go, if it requires a two-thirds vote.
Well, we technically, the $7.5 million was authorized to be borrowed in the original, I believe, in the original vote.
In 2015, there was authorization to borrow $7.4 million, which was the expected cost of the project at that time. But the expectation was that the town's contribution would be $1 million. So this is really to kind of go back and adjust the town's contribution as part of the higher than expected construction costs. So the borrowing authority, I think, has been, I know town, David, you were speaking to town council.
We already ran it by bond counsel Rick Manley. And he was in agreement that the authorization is there. He just can't weigh in politically whether you want to exercise that right, but.
So, to answer Frank's question, is that a two-thirds vote or a simple majority?
If you want to have make it exempt debt, I think you have to have a two-thirds.
But if it went under the existing authorization, it would be a majority vote to confirm that that it's going to be more than the million that was suggested at the time.
Adjust the internal divisions. It's only a majority vote.
This would just be a confirmatory vote rather than a ask for additional debt, because you're using the original authorization. That's a question. It's more of a...
Yes, it would be.
Debt exemption then?
There's already been a debt exemption authorized.
So it's straightforward.
So simple majority, yep.
Good question.
Then no ballot.
That's right, yeah.
I'm speaking as a resident, and I don't think that that's the understanding of a lot of people, you know, that the vote was $7.5 million. I think most people are thinking that we were only spending $1 million on the library.
That's the whole reason for having this town meeting.
That's the reason for...
That's a concern, I think.
And
Most people don't have that understanding that we voted on $7.5 million. They're thinking we voted on $1 million.
And that's exactly the rationale for this.
why they're having a meeting. That's why we're having a
We
meeting,
wouldn't
yeah.
necessarily even need a town meeting to spend that $7 million now, except that I don't think this board would, you know, support that. We feel like we need to go back to the town to get authorization to spend more than the $1.1 million that was authorized over the 2 town meetings when it was authorized. Also, I think Jim would have to move and change his phone number.
Definitely expect to go back.
Yeah.
Remember this, what we always discussed.
That was very clear when that was discussed in 2015 at the late hour when the number was increased, because the state was really telling us we needed to increase it, so.
I think, I just wanted to add that when you look at the number, originally, I think the amount to bring the original building into compliance was $3.5 million with disability requirements.
Yeah.
So you're taking care of that all part of the number. It's,
And I also would note that I don't think the million has been borrowed yet, so this has all been funded by the private money so far as well.
It's been borrowed. No, it's been borrowed.
It's been borrowed, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the only reason we've been able to get this far.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
What's the sense of the board? Do we want to approve the December 11th meeting?
So moved. Whether we call a special town meeting December 11th. And
We also have to open and put
Yeah.
the dates for the opening and closing of the
yeah,
warrant.
I'm just looking for the town clerk schedule.
Would we typically schedule a second date in case it needs to be extended?
usually.
Usually,
I think
yeah.
we should, given what's on this agenda.
And it would have to, the second date would have to be on Pine Hill,
Yeah,
wouldn't it?
that's the only day available at Lanquist.
Yeah,
Commons.
understood.
Yeah.
We could have it in the middle of the street, but we've got to have a place to, I mean, we've got to have a time to make sure we get through the business, otherwise we're scheduling at that point.
You'll probably have to,
What about that next Saturday?
you'd probably have to adjourn to a Saturday.
Yeah, maybe.
That might be a good choice.
If you gotta go to a second night, you're not gonna fit in Pine Hill.
We cannot have a special town meeting at Pine Hill. It's just, it's extremely expensive. because of the audio and everything else that we have to buy. I think it costs a lot of money, and also, there's not enough chairs. It's very difficult to count all the people. There's only like 175 chairs.
And most second nights, we get
Yeah.
about 100 people, but yeah.
And we had 478 people, plus guests and non-voters. So we had probably 500-something people at Pine Hill, and it did not work well.
I would put the second date on a Saturday, and maybe Lindquist Commons could be available on a Saturday.
So my motion was to call a special town meeting for December 11th. I'm not going to include in the motion to open and close the warrant because the suggested timeline has that happening in October. We have other meetings between now and then to deal with that. And I'm not going to include a second night because I think we need to have further research done as to whether we can get Saturday. But at least to get the ball rolling for the first night, I'm suggesting in the motion that we call a special town meeting for December 11th.
Diane, have we explored with the high school whether or not Lindquist is available that Saturday morning? I assume not.
No, we have not, but we'll make the call tomorrow.
Great. Is there a second to Paul's motion?
Second.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would say is there basically are two big rooms at that high school. There's a gym and there's Lindquist Commons.
Bless you.
Right? I mean, those are the two places, and if we can't do Pine Hill, you know, it's going to be pretty difficult to have us wedged into only being able to schedule a town meeting on the few nights when Lindquist isn't already claimed. So we either are going to have to get comfortable with finding another space, or think about if there's a way to use the gymnasium at Dover Sherborn, or
As a proud
do something
former
else.
commissioner of the Dover Sherborn Youth Basketball Program, I can tell you that on
Saturdays are not good.
Saturday, December 12th, that gym will be filled.
Yeah, and a lot of times there's plays and things at Lindquist, so,
I think that's what they're doing, is they're not having play rehearsal that night.
yeah,
And
so.
they could give us
Yeah, no,
a date.
I'm more optimistic that Lindquist will be available.
Yeah.
I can tell you the gym was not.
Yeah. I don't mean that day, I'm just saying in general,
Yeah, yeah.
as a general matter. I'm sitting here listening to us, you know, town meeting's probably the most important event in a town, and we don't even have a space in our town that's big enough now to hold the people who are going to come to town meeting, because we had one huge town meeting.
Pull the trucks out of the highway garage.
You think so? Well, maybe that's the answer.
We don't want to park there, though.
Paul?
It's got like 20 acres.
Or we find somebody with a barn who wants to let us use it.
Other towns have also done outdoor tents.
Yes, that permit.
Pretty expensive, but other towns have done outdoor tents. Foxborough has done outdoor tents.
Tough to do that, so.
I had one town meeting with 1,125 people, and they were sprawled over quite a bit of space, loudspeakers, and it was something like out of the Roman Empire with Mark Antony trying to hear.
Auto reservation.
Paul, if
We have
you,
a big empty building right next door.
if you don't set a second date on the warrant, you can just
Do it at
still
town
figure
meeting.
out and adjourn to
You can
that
adjourn
date.
to another, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Mary, Jim, Jeff, any input from your groups on December 11th? Sorry?
I think that sounds fine.
Advisory is the most important.
Yeah.
Advisory?
Jeff?
Jeffrey?
Jeff, advisory?
Advisory?
I just was writing to them, I don't know, we'll have to have a public hearing, you know.
Jeannie, I believe, talked to Steve Leahy about that
Oh, did
date.
Jeannie talk to it?
I
Okay.
think so.
And we plugged it in for November 14th,
He said Jean did.
November 14th.
Yeah, we have a timeline here, and it says advisory, November 14th.
Oh, okay, I didn't get a timeline for that. That's okay, I'm okay, Diane.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Jeannie, I talked to Jeannie yesterday, and she said she was gonna, I think she talked to Steve Leahy just to see if those dates, those potential dates work. So she could put this timeline together for us for tonight.
One disadvantage to that is that gives it, means you have to have a number of months.
Not necessarily. You can have a preliminary number, and then when we get to town meeting, it can be refined.
Right. And not to exceed number, though? Yeah.
I'm sorry, who has the timeline? Jane?
Is this the one from?
Yeah, you want a copy of it here?
I have mine.
This is very clear, thank you, Jackie. I don't know if this
That's
was
from,
yours.
was Jeannie.
It's Jeannie? Jeannie. It's really good.
Carol, I think.
Okay, yeah, I think they worked together on it, yeah.
Yes, Carol put the timeline together.
It's great.
Yeah, and thanks to Carol, Diane, and Dave for coming up with the Linquist option. It's certainly far better.
So how about calling the question?
Any other discussion? All in favor of Paul's motion? That was seconded, wasn't it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I seconded it.
It's so long ago, I can't remember.
Yes, I gave him it.
All in favor of the motion? Passes unanimously, 5-0.
To adjourn now?
Sean.
Next,
We got road projects.
we've got Sean is up next with the road construction projects and scheduling of road projects.
Good night.
Good evening. I believe in your packet, you guys got a document.
We did.
Yes.
The first section is what I'm proposing for road work. Obviously, it's late in the season. As you'll recall earlier, we hadn't assigned anything to Chapter 90 yet
Right.
for this current year's allocation from the state.
Yeah.
And there's more coming. So the governor's filed additional legislation because there was a surplus, $1 billion surplus at the end of the year, and they're including money for an additional distribution using the Chapter 90 formula.
Plus it's an
It's
election.
good, I spent some of it.
So plus it's an election.
20%, I think, right?
What's that, Eric?
I think it's a 20%, that's what they were talking about, yeah.
For this year? All right, that's not in our account yet, but by the time I finish this, maybe it will be. Most of the work we did this year and in the past few years has been grinding, rebuilding, paving. Most of what we did in the past 20 years was shimming, which is where you do a thin coat, and chip sealing. Most of our old roads are chip sealed, either double chip sealed. We had some that were rubber. Maple Street was, but then it got ground up. One of the last major thoroughfares we have that we haven't touched in quite a while is Elliott Street. Elliott Street's still in good shape. It's got a very good base. But those that travel it every day remember towards the end of last winter, it was starting to blow out pretty big holes. And Natick's in the same situation. It's a little bit worse in South Natick. It was all paved in the same project. The state did it. If we do nothing, everyone I've talked to say the road will last another year, maybe. So we don't have a choice. I don't want to rebuild it. It would be incredibly expensive. Everyone remembers how much we spent on this leg of 16, and we don't need to. So this is kind of the key to good roadway management, is catch it while it's still good.
Pretty short money, too.
It is. So that's a rubber chip seal,
Yeah.
which is a better candidate on higher speed roads. You wouldn't spend the money on a rubber chip seal on McGregor Drive or really any of the neighborhoods, but you need to on the higher speed roads. It's less of a rough surface. I don't know if anyone remembers, Chuck, you may not have been living there, but when Maple Street got chip sealed, they double chip sealed it with a bigger aggregate intentionally to try to slow cars down. Well, the neighbors didn't like that because it was noisy.
I think Dover had a similar experience.
Dover did?
Yeah. Yep.
They did the same thing with speed humps. So it's too late, it's too cold to do the rubber right now. So we'll probably patch it. It needs some prep work anyway. We'll probably do most of that this fall to hold it together. And then hit it as early as next spring as they're rolling. It's very temperature sensitive, especially the rubber. And the same goes for Hunting Lane, Nason Hill. I put the dates, it's kind of interesting. Hunting Lane hasn't been touched since 1998. And that gets a lot of traffic. If you don't live there, you don't realize how much traffic shoots down Hunting Lane, but it's a lot. And again, I don't want to rebuild it. It's very long, and it would cost a lot of money.
It's
So,
amazing that it was done 20 years ago.
yeah. Stretches of it are good and stretches of it are a maintenance nightmare in the winter, including the rocks that the plows hit and
That's what.
shatter your teeth when you hit them.
Is pave over those, or can you hammer those?
We're gonna hammer those, because I've done a little digging in the Hunting Lane neighborhood, and usually they're the size of a Volkswagen.
And those old roads are just paved over even ledge, you know what I mean? There's nothing, yeah, there's only so much you can do.
Right. But if I go after it and it's that big, it'll be a sinkhole. You know it will. And Nason Hill's the same. Nason Hill was done in 2002. And again, the rural roads like that only last so long. Both of them are good candidates. I talked to several different contractors. So again, what they'll do, if we can get it in, and we think we can, you guys will vote tonight, we'll apply to Chapter 90. They'll approve it, and the crew to shim it will get in here this fall. So we'll do 90% of the prep work this fall. Some of it may come up during the plowing, depends how bad the winter is, but it'll keep the road from getting that much worse. And then we clean it up in the spring, touch up anything, and hit it, and it's a new surface again, hopefully for 20 years. And again, this is we're going just past, that total's 330, we have 304 in the account. By the time that money's spent, we may see that 20%, which means I won't have even spent the entire, this year's allocation. And by the time this is done, we'll be into next year, and hopefully, long before that, I'll get the next leg approved by you guys.
So before you leave that, you should have received a survey, like all 351 cities and towns have received.
From MMA?
Yes.
I did.
And we want you to fill it out and return it, because then we are able to total up the total amount that all 351 cities and towns need, and that's our ask to the legislature, to fund that amount. And it turns out to fully fund the 30,000 miles of roads in the Commonwealth, we need like 600 million, and right now the legislature's funding it at 200 million. But we need your attention to filling out that survey. And
I think he said he did all right.
Did you? It's sitting on my desk. I was cross-checking a few numbers.
You got it already. You didn't-
I have
You
it.
didn't complete it.
Yeah, I think it just came out last week.
well, some towns have already responded, and I was asked to.
I want to make sure the numbers are right. But yeah, it's coming.
Hey, Sean, speaking of numbers, so these numbers total up to more than the 304?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
Is that
pushing
because
it
of the
up.
spring, you're pushing some out till spring? Is that what's going on?
Oh yeah, this won't be spent. They'll approve it. Because I could get $1 million worth of projects approved. They're only going to fund what they fund.
But you've got three projects on here that you want to do,
Exactly.
and I'm just saying there's not enough money to total up those three projects.
Right.
So what are we doing?
Thank you. That's
One of two things. One, by the time they're done in late spring, the extra money may be put in that account,
Okay.
or we self-fund the variance.
The variance is about 27,000, it looks like.
And around the same time, the next fiscal year, money may or may not get approved. It'll be approved by then. Whether or not it's in the account is a different story. But, I mean, we're looking at bills they'll start now, we'll pay for some of it now. But that's, May or June by the time the bills would roll in next year, to the tail end of this.
Besides the Chapter 90 stuff, I mean, do you guys routinely go out and patch those little linear chunks that come out of the?
Yeah, and that comes out of our budget.
Yeah.
Or the earlier part of this year, we were spending the capital money that Ed had got two years ago.
Has that all been spent, the capital?
For the most part. And that's important to have, either in the budget or, because there's a lot of non-Chapter 90 money work we have to do. And we did a lot of it, the cemetery lane and other stuff. Chapter 90 wouldn't have paid for that.
Before you go on to the other items, any further discussion? I would move to approve the 3 roadwork projects listed in Sean's September 20th memo, CM&D Facilities Projects Update totaling a little more than $331,000.
Second.
Any discussion up here? Discussion from the public?
I would just say I'm glad, these are all substantial, important roads. I'm glad to see that's where the money's going.
particularly Elliott Street, that's,
I think all people, they're all cut-through roads or
yeah, no, I just,
roads that get,
Elliott's in good
Bad
shape, I'd
attention.
hate to see him get in bad shape, so.
Yeah.
All in favor? Great, thanks.
Thanks. You want to talk about the rest or no?
Yeah, keep going. No, I just wanted to finish.
Next topic is trees. You're not going to get me up here without talking about trees. I don't have much to say about it, other than we know that the list that was posted, there was supposed to be a hearing, but there was a little confusion with the way it was posted with the planning board. They had to postpone the hearing, but that list is north of 500 trees. We've talked about that. We talked about in the last meeting that Eversource has committed. I'm still in talks with them, and they're targeting after the first of the year getting here. It's going to be very visible. Not so much the trees, but the crews being here. It'll be a little disruptive.
And the Eversource estimate was, it was going to cost them $590,000 to
something like that.
deal with those 500 trees?
They were going to, no. They were going to throw 500,000 at that list. Their estimate, if they were going after that list at their rate, and we don't get their rate, it was north of $1 million. They figured their list was about 500, they looked at my list and saw about 590.
Sean, this says 500 plus oaks, so those are they all oaks? Or-
Pretty much.
And are they all within the public way? In other words,
Most of
these
them.
are between stone walls?
Most of them. And again, this is what's difficult. It's a little moving target because we stayed away from where we knew Eversource was.
Yeah.
So once Eversource gives me the list and we gel, and obviously there's some overlap, but it's more than that. 200 or 300 trees died this year.
Yeah.
But I can't prove it till they don't leaf out next year.
No, my only point was, in addition to what Eversource is doing on their roads, they've also gone around and asked people about trees that are close to the roads, where they're near power lines, and so they're going to be doing private tree work too.
Yes.
They're gonna be doing-
Eversource, right, and when you drive by, unless it's your yard, you often don't know whether that's Stanley Tree Crews doing the private property.
That's right.
I mean, they look at it the same, and then they separate it because they want to get a letter from that resident if they
Yeah.
know it's on private property. Sometimes they come to us because our road layouts are all over the place.
Yep.
Route 16's laid out at 60 feet. That's about 25 feet wider than the road, so it's tough. It's deceiving when you drive around, you think, that must be a resident's tree, it's 10 feet off the road. Well, sometimes it's not. But sometimes there's stone walls that are 2.5 feet off the road, so there's the line. And yeah, our list, as we go through it and actually do it, we're going through for approval. There's certainly some orange dots that are probably blatantly residents, but I haven't put that list out to bid yet.
And these are trees, these don't include the killer limbs that are on trees that might be healthy, but they've got
No,
something hanging.
and I mean, the unfortunate reality is we're having the live trees are falling at a faster rate right now than the dead ones. Because they had a really good growing season. So it's pretty hard to, you can't predict which one's gonna fall
Yeah.
right now. You know the dead one's eventually gonna get brittle and start shedding some heavy limbs. So, winter storms are gonna be pretty dangerous, because we're not gonna get them down before the snow starts sticking to them. That's most of what we have for trees. It's a little bit of a waiting game. We're constantly going after some of them. We took some down on the campus. Because of the holiday yesterday, there was a couple we had to get off of Pine Hill Lane before the lines get ripped down again. One of them was a 50-inch oak tree. Stumpies couldn't get it up with their crane. We had to move it with the loader. It was absolutely massive.
Sean, when you said the town campus, it was the two trees that were separating the lot between Town Hall and the vacant lot. Two huge trees that weren't gone, were barely noticed that they were gone.
Right.
Sure, some people did.
Yeah, now.
Haven't heard any? Oh, I shouldn't say.
The calls come in.
Actually,
We're still constantly working with the library on some of the site work.
Well, before you leave trees, your last item was on trees. We were expecting to ask for emergency funding from this fall town meeting for tree removal, and you've heard we just set a date. How much are you looking for?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what we're comfortable with asking for that we can get done. I need to kind of manage that with Eversource. I can't go after the trees while Eversource is going after them, or we'll almost cripple the travel through town. So we got to stage it, and I'd prefer to not ask for money for more than I can spend when we have the Springtown meeting coming around. But asking for less than 100,000 is not going to do any good. 500,000 I couldn't possibly use, so it's somewhere between the two. But our budget of 50 to 60 isn't going to touch it either.
What's the reserve fund this year? Sure. 300,000, I mean, there's also the possibility of using some of the reserve fund, I would say, for that, and I don't know if there's anything at this point, the 300,000 reserve fund.
I was gonna ask the same thing, because you gotta be past the 60 grand just from the trees you're picking up that are already built, too.
What's that?
You probably way exceeded what your budget was on the trees that have already fallen.
Well, I will.
Yeah.
Right.
I will.
I think
The
we should-
unplanned tree removal is going to use up to 60 in a heartbeat.
I think depending on how much you use, if it's a lower number towards the 100 grand, it may be able to fall within the reserve fund, and you may not need to ask for. I know advisory, from my time on advisory, the less dollar amounts that we're asking for at a special town meeting versus compared to looking at it with it alongside everything else in the spring,
Right.
the better. So if there's any way, if it's a smaller number to use it from the reserve fund, I mean, I would just consider that when you're looking at the number that you're going to be asking for.
Well, for two reasons. One, the other reason is that if you do it not on an emergency basis, but a regular fund basis, but using the reserve fund, maybe we get more trees done.
Now,
And
right.
the other thing, which you know more about than I do, is I think the tree guys love the winter because the ground's frozen, so they can actually go out and stuff, because cherry pickers are easier sometimes, if they're not doing the ones by the road. Sometimes, like, particularly when they work in your yard, they can go out and, cut across it, the ground's frozen. If we took money from the reserve fund and put down some that might be the top 50 of the 500 or whatever.
Right, I mean, it would be better to plan it. I mean, almost pick a number and try to hit that with a bid. I mean, I need to put the stuff out to bid, we're getting killed just taking one or two or a day's worth of trees down.
I would just suggest working with Sharon on that, just to estimate, I mean, some things that you think, just based on where legal spending's at, that kind of stuff that we use the reserve fund later in the year, and think about if some of that 300,000 could be used towards this rather than asking for it at the town meeting.
I think it's a great suggestion.
Right. I mean, the other problem with town meeting is, where's the money coming from? And if it's gonna be borrowed,
Then it
then you're
goes to
forcing
ballot.
yourself into a ballot. and
That's-
You got me past the first of the year before.
Jackie doesn't want that.
But you don't want a ballot just for borrowing for trees either.
I'm not sure you can bond something that exists.
I know, right, exactly.
That's maybe a big log cabin or something.
Let's go into town hall.
We can build a new place to have town meetings with all the law.
So a resident asked me a question, and I try to answer it, but it's best that you answer it. He was saying that with all these trees that have to come down, it's all this lumber, we could sell the trees, we could make a profit that would pay for the tree removals and have some money to spare. What's our answer to that?
Good luck.
We're doing it, but the volume is incredible.
So I'm trying to work on that, because we were asked to work on that by Stanley. The first answer you should probably give is supply and demand is very simple. Wood chips used to be worth money, and then when March showed up, we couldn't get rid of them. Logs are the same way, so there's two sides to that. One, when you put work out to bid, and we're probably gonna bid it both ways, the tree guys have the contacts to get rid of the wood. It's not like they're paying to get rid of the wood. It's a commodity at that point. So they're either gonna factor in how close they can go to get rid of it, or if we're gonna take it. I don't have a place to take log trucks, 6, 8, 10 of them a day. I'm trying to find it, but you have to own it. So it has to be a selectman-owned property that I could do that at. Certainly isn't on Butler Street, I wish it was. There is some properties, but we'd have to clear them, and the neighbors have to be able to pallet that. Everyone should rest assured, we're not giving away something that's worth millions of dollars, it's just not.
So let me add something, that's okay. With the, so you are going to bid, this isn't something off like the state bid list or a T&M type thing? You actually say, here's like 100 trees, give me a price for these 100 trees, something like that?
Yes.
Okay. In that case, that's noticeable almost any construction work, where if there's refuse value, since you're under a low bid paradigm, they actually factor whatever value there is in that. Like when we do water main pipe, there's actually value to the old cast iron pipe for recycling, but you don't get that back and recycle yourself, it's factored in. So you get like 10 people bidding on it, and they all know the value of it, and it's factored into the low bid process when they do that.
Exactly. And so the only other, if I found a way to logistically do it in town, to take the logs off their hand, we could possibly put that into the bid both ways. You're taking the logs, you're leaving the logs,
You could
and
do it
have
both
everyone
ways.
bid it that way.
And just pick the more advantageous.
But it's a bigger headache than you think. It's not, people think it's okay, but then when you end up with 50-inch oak logs that weigh 1,000 pounds per foot, we don't even own equipment that can move that, so you gotta watch what you wish for.
Yeah, and we have trouble with buildings, we're gonna have worse trouble with raw materials. We're really not in the business.
Right, I don't have equipment, nor do I
We're not in
have
that business. We're
the
town.
resources to do it.
Exactly.
If we want, I'll come to special town meeting and ask for a $150,000 firewood processor, and we can drop the firewood market down to $50 a cord. But I'm gonna have to hire people to do it, and someone's gotta give up a 6-acre parcel of land and
Yeah, that's
tell the neighbors to get used to the noise for a couple of months.
Right.
So it's not as simple as it sounds. I mean, we did start last year in having people sign releases. If they really want wood chips, we can bring them when they're at the yard and we need to get rid of them. But that's pretty small scale. When Stanley starts chipping 7 truckloads of chips a day, it's gotta go somewhere. So we are working on that. I mean, there's firewood that falls out of the sky every day right now. Some of it we bring back to the yard. If people want it, I'll bring it, but you gotta take what I got. You don't get to pick it. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Terrific. Town Hall?
So there's still a lot of work to do, as we know, upcoming, and there's a lot of organization between the library project and us with the water. By the end of this process, we will have fixed some issues that DEP's been knocking us on for probably 20 years. But it's a little bit time consuming and it'll be a little bit costly. But when it's all said and done, we're gonna have a good water system here that isn't plagued with problems that keep recurring, other than the fact that it's coming from a well on site. But the plumbing in this building has just been patched together through the generations of this building and the others.
Well, when you use the word costly, you're not going to be needing, you have enough money to do it?
We have money in the capital, the facilities capital. So no, I'm not coming to fall town meeting asking for money for the water system. I planned on this. The exact dollar amount, I still don't know. We're working through that, but.
That was my question. You got to the bottom line of the question that I was.
Right. Yeah.
That's where I was heading.
And that's about it. If anyone drove by in the past couple days, we have shiny new red overhead doors on the fire station.
I like the red doors. I was gonna compliment the red
A
doors.
little less of the contemporary look. We thought it would look good in a small town.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks.
Next on the agenda is Town Administrator Report.
Yeah, just a few things. The trees that were taken down today were part of the library site plan of the whole campus that was already approved. I forgot to mention that. We awarded the cemetery drainage project to Fenari Corporation of Millbury. Their bid was about $183,000. We had about 10 bidders. So it came in much lower than what we expected it to be. So that was good. And we also met with DEP Commissioner this morning and the Municipal Recycling Coordinator. Sean was in on that meeting, me, Diane, Jeannie. Am I forgetting anyone? No, okay. So it was very productive, and they gave us a few ideas on what we could pursue as far as grants and some changes maybe at the transfer station and recycling to offset some of our costs. And that's all I had.
Boy, I didn't think there were a lot of recycling options. I thought the market was pretty, I understand the availability of grant money, but I
Well,
didn't think there
there's
were a lot of alternatives.
but they said that there's a state grant through them that would provide us with a compactor for compacting corrugated cardboard. So then you go to like E.L. Harvey and try to negotiate a better price that you're specifically separating the corrugated cardboard from your other recycling. And the same thing with glass, like to try to cut a deal, pulling the glass out and taking it to a different vendor.
And I will say, just, that it's, this is a regional problem, and there's no real solution. At some point, cities and towns are gonna start actually just looking at maybe stop separating it. Framingham's paying $72.50 for trash and $80 for recyclable. And, and they probably told you this, it's all because China has increased their
They
criteria.
talked about the paper market and that it's trying to rebuild.
In the selectmen's reports.
Just one thing, I just wanted to compliment George Fisk and his group on the Grange Fair. It was a wonderful event on Saturday, and the Taste of the Grange on Friday night before. They did a wonderful job. It was a great community event, well-attended. Saw a lot of people there. The kids loved it, too. It was a great family event.
That's what I was going to say. I second everything he said.
Add to the 16 Boy Scouts camped out that night.
And were there 16 in the morning? With those scarecrows. They're pretty scary, those scarecrows.
Mike, Eric? No. Terrific.
Move to adjourn?
Second. All in favor? Thanks.